listener production.
Hello, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Are you across the latest viral attempts by young voters to keep Peter Dutton out of power? There's a good reason you might not be, and that's because they've managed to stay entirely online, and it appears his PR team is doing a pretty good job of cleaning it all up.
I think this trend has kind of been obviously so tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time done something really important, which is engage the younger audience in the political conversation.
Why some Aussies are hyping up the rumour mill when it comes to the opposition leader, and what they hope that'll achieve. That's coming up in the second half of this episode. But first, it's the start of a new week, and that means headlines with Chris Spiru. Welcome to Monday, February 24.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody, and happy Monday. A new poll out today has Labor on track to lose the federal election as the coalition looks to avoid a repeat of 2022. The Resolve poll gave the opposition a 55% lead over the government's 45% two-party preferred and had Peter Dutton ahead of Anthony Albanese when respondents were asked who would offer strong leadership. It comes after a weekend that was all about Medicare.
One card covers it all, not your credit card. This, your Medicare card.
Oh, and look, if you haven't seen that clip, I do urge you to go and watch it because that is a man delivering something with conviction. That was the Prime Minister there announcing the biggest boost to Medicare since it was created 40 years ago, an $8.5 billion investment to guarantee cheaper GP visits for all Australians. While unveiling the election promise in Tasmania yesterday, Albanese pledged to ensure 90% of doctor visits will be bulk billed by 2030.
Yeah, it is a huge commitment and it definitely plays to Labor's strengths. You might remember the Medicare campaign of the 2022 election, during which the party told voters that Scott Morrison and the Liberals had plans to rip funding out of our universal healthcare service. That undoubtedly had a hand in winning Labor the vote that year. But the coalition is clearly out to avoid a repeat. And while Albo was making his big announcement, the opposition was already out confirming it'd match the promise and go even further with a $9 billion commitment.
They are prepared to use this as a scare campaign. The Labor Party are making an announcement to fix a problem that they have caused, so we will support them fixing the mess.
That was the Shadow Health Minister Anne Ruston speaking there. So while the policy match might have taken the wind out of Labor's sails, it will be viewed as a popular announcement, and it came after the latest poll we talked about at the top of this story. So we don't know what the impact has been initially on how voters are feeling about voting Labor or Liberal. And look, it's worth noting over the 2023-24 financial year, less than half of Aussies were always bulk billed when visiting their GP. And there is a concerning trend of people skipping the doctor because they simply cannot afford it. So Albanese's pledge and now the coalition's to have 9 in 10 GP visits bulk billed is a no-brainer, really. It's something that everyone's going to go, well, yeah, I don't want to pay to go to the doctor if I can avoid it.
Yeah, and actually, funnily enough, I was waiting in a medical centre that I usually don't go to on Sunday morning when this announcement dropped, and I was watching it on the tellies and I was reading all the articles coming through, and I was like, oh, wow, how interesting is this? This is great. And then as I finished my doctor visit, they said to me, oh, we're a mixed billing practice. And I was like, wait, no, what do you mean? Because I've always gone to a doctor that bulk bills and I've never had to pay for a GP visit. So as this was all happening, I was like, oh, the serendipity of it all. I welcome this. I love it. But the cynic in me is just immediately defaulting to, why did we have to wait for an election to come and roll around for these promises to roll out? For me, it's bizarre. This is something that's hurting everyday Australians. This is something that everyday Australians want. Why are we waiting for Labor to be re-elected or for the Libs to get back into power for something to happen?
Well, it's funny you say that because Peter Dutton kind of put up a challenge to Anthony Albanese because federal parliament is due to sit in the next couple of weeks. We keep teasing he's about to call an election. Now, if Albanese does call an election, that means that parliament won't sit and we'll head into an election campaign officially. But Peter Dutton said, well, we're supposed to sit in the next couple of weeks. Come to the table. Let's legislate it. So it's a good point you make and a sentiment shared by the opposition leader.
Oh, no. We're hitting the sting. Changing pace now, today marks the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And in Kyiv early this morning, President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's willing to give up his presidency in exchange for peace.
Are you happy to leave the president's chair if it will bring Ukraine peace? Yes, I am happy. If it is for the peace of Ukraine, and I also can exchange it for NATO membership for Ukraine. I'm focused on Ukraine's security now, not in 20 years, and I'm not going to be in chair for decades. That is not my dream.
That translation thanks to the BBC. The comments follow escalating hostilities between the Ukrainian president and Donald Trump, who late last week falsely accused Kyiv of starting the conflict and labelled Zelensky a dictator who didn't hold elections. Trump has since walked back those comments, later admitting Russia attacked, however blamed Joe Biden and Zelensky for not ending the war earlier.
The Ukrainian president's promise to step down comes as Russia launched a record 267 drones targeting 13 regions, including Kyiv and Odessa overnight. It is understood at least 2 people have died, a man and a mother of twins among them. Now, high-level talks to end the war are continuing this week. French President Emmanuel Macron and British PM Keir Starmer are travelling to Washington to meet with Donald Trump. Now, it is expected they will both separately try to convince him to not rush a ceasefire deal with Putin, to keep Europe involved in the discussions, and also have talks about military guarantees to Ukraine.
Yeah, and just circling back to that issue of NATO, that's really a sticking point in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. For those who might not be across or need a bit of a refresher, NATO was a military alliance first formed in 1949 on the back end of World War II. And essentially, if one member is attacked, others will help to defend it. That's the promise of NATO. Russia famously does not want Ukraine in NATO. They're saying if that happens, it'll put NATO forces too close to its borders, and it doesn't want that to happen. Ukraine, interestingly enough, has been eligible to enter since 2008, but there is a whole heap of internal politics that's stopping that from happening, with NATO chiefs saying time and time again that it really is too difficult to happen while this war is still happening. However, now that we're hitting that third anniversary, Zelensky's really, really hopeful that upcoming talks with Europe and the US will help them be able to join. Whether that's going to happen is, which is awful to say, but it's anyone's guess. And bringing it back home, Peter Dutton has issued a statement on the third anniversary praising the strength, bravery and courage of the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky. He said that Australia values and respects the sovereignty of the country, and he's actually branded the invasion as Russia's illegal, unprovoked and abominable invasion of Ukraine.
Pope Francis has asked Catholics around the world to pray for him as he continues to receive treatment in hospital for double pneumonia. In his pre-written message that he would usually deliver on a Sunday, he also thanked the doctors and nurses who had been treating him. The 88-year-old has now spent 10 days in hospital, and this message came after the Vatican revealed over the weekend his condition continues to be critical, having received blood transfusions and high flows of oxygen. However, we did get an updated statement yesterday or overnight our time saying that he'd had a tranquil night. So we kind of seem to keep getting these briefs from the Vatican that, you know, it's a little bit bad. He's feeling better. So we've heard directly from the Pope this time. He's asked for prayers.
And have you ever received an unhinged email from your boss? Probably yes, but what about one from your manager's strange new friend who hangs out in the office quite a bit? Well, US federal employees were confronted with just that over the weekend when an email hit their inbox with the subject line, "What did you do last week?" And it appears to have come from an Elon Musk directive. The Doge head, that's the Department of Government Efficiency, announced on X that every employee of the US government would be getting the communication, and failure to respond would be taken as a resignation. The emails have been confirmed as authentic by the government's own HR department, Sash.
Yeah, so the BBC says it's obtained a copy of one of these emails and that employees were asked to explain their accomplishments from the past week in 5 bullet points without disclosing classified information before midnight on Monday. So that deadline is yet to pass in the US. That'll be like Tuesday our time, so tomorrow our time. Now, this has, of course, sparked anger from workers and unions who have labelled it cruel and disrespectful. Some agencies, among them the FBI, have actually told their staff not to respond for now, even though that Musk claim on X was that, well, if you don't, you're going to get fired. He has defended the move on X, saying a significant number of people who are supposed to be working for the government are doing so little work they're not checking their emails at all. He also said non-existent people or the identities of dead people are being used to collect paychecks. Now, that is something that he said without any proof, unsurprisingly. It's unhinged and it's kind of amusing because it's so unhinged. However, you know, these are people, and this is my thing at the end of the day. You can claim government inefficiency all you want, but at the end of the day, people are showing up to do a job and you are hounding them about whether they're doing that job and laughing, and they're making such a big joke and a song and dance out of it. I'm like, these are people who are just earning money, right? They've applied for a job, they got given the job, they're doing the job. Like, the way that Musk is going about it is really on the nose. And the union that represents many government employees has actually threatened legal action if employees are unlawfully terminated. All that said, Donald Trump's a big fan. He says Musk's doing a great job at reducing the size of the federal government, and he would like to see him get more aggressive in the pursuit.
Aggressive.
I don't know how you get more aggressive than that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just really hope that the head of listener isn't listening and taking any sort of inspiration from this, because I am someone who famously doesn't check emails, and I do not want to be tendering my accidental resignation any day soon.
Maybe just be extra on your emails for the next couple of weeks, lest the head of listener get any ideas from Elon Musk, although I'm sure they won't. Chris, thank you. Next up, we're getting into your deep dive, and it's a really interesting one. It's looking at these viral trends that have recently kicked off that kind of aim to keep Peter Dutton out of power. It's a really interesting chat. Stick around.
A warning, this deep dive may not be suitable for little ears. I'll do my best to dance around certain explicit and sexual themes, but do feel free to send them on their merry way.
Peggy Sue, Peggy Sue, pretty, 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 pretty Peggy Sue.
Now that that's out of the way, hi. Have you heard the rumour that Peter Dutton might be Peggy Sue?
I've got a booking with Peggy Sue tomorrow. If you don't know, Peggy's a client of mine who likes to take the back route. Not my back alley, he wants me to take his. Candle could work, it's super cute.
That was Kayla Jade there, an insanely popular content creator and sex worker with 1.9 million followers on TikTok. She likes to talk about her clients, with aliases, of course, and you just heard her there discussing one of her high-profile male clients who pays her thousands of dollars to peg him. Kayla has amassed tens of millions of views in her storytime videos documenting her interactions with Peggy Sue, and her comment section early on was filled with people guessing who it could possibly be. A frontrunner who's gained the most traction, opposition leader Peter Dutton. Enter TikToker and vocal critic of the coalition, Holly McAlpine, who seized upon the moment, calling on her audience to flood Dutton's comment section on socials with the words Peggy Sue. There was not a single post on Dutton's feed this month that didn't have multiple comments suggesting he was indeed Peggy Sue. The comments have since disappeared, not because people have stopped posting them, but after sussing it out ourselves, it seems his media team have stepped in to clean up the mess. And with this year's vote, the first in which Gen Z and millennials will outnumber boomers at the ballot box, figuring out who exactly is influencing young voters and why is pretty significant. But thinking about it more critically, is spreading rumours and silly memes opening us up to meaningful discourse, or just simply slinging some shit? Holly McAlpine, who describes herself as Peter Dutton's worst nightmare, joins us now. Holly, welcome to the briefing. Why did you get your audience to spam Peter Dutton's socials with Peggy Sue comments?
I mean, look, I definitely didn't initially set out to do that, but it happened quite organically, I would say. Someone just left a comment on my page and said, Peter Dutton is Peggy Sue. And I guess from my point of view, it's if the shoe-shaped candle fits, you know? So I did one video responding to it, and I kind of just did that, and it kind of blew up.
Yeah, raised a bit of doubt.
And it went from there, yeah.
So would you say you're, somewhat responsible for the flooding of comments that Peter Dutton has received, with the word Peggy Sue?
I don't think I started it, but I definitely did provide the catalyst to encourage people to go over there and do that. I think, we all know it's satire, we all know it's tongue-in-cheek, but it is definitely a harmless way of the younger demographic being able to express a level of frustration with Dutton.
What do you think those frustrations are? Like, what are you seeing people, heading out and using Peggy Sue as the vessel? What are they heading out and criticising him for?
I mean, firstly, I think this trend has kind of been obviously so tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time done something really important, which is engage the younger audience in the political conversation. And this is a man who's voted against affordable housing. He's voted against penalty rates. He's voted against expanded parental leave. These are really important issues, and it's just provided a means for us to express some frustration with those things,
This feels most comparable to the rumour that ScoMo shat himself at Engadine Macca's, a rumour that originated in 2018 and swirled for a really long time. Why do you think these keep happening to the Libs?
Because I do think that they are out of touch with the younger demographic. And more than that, though, we all know we're joking, but it's something that kind of associates them with, I can see that happening.
A big criticism of politicians and politics by many Australians at the moment is that things are becoming far too focused on the person and less about the politics and their policies, to be honest. Is it fair to say that the Peggy Sue campaign, which is inherently personal and pretty sexual in nature, does just that? Is this us young voters and, Gen Z and TikTok users playing in the gutter?
We have to focus on the person because he is the figurehead of the party, and what he's voting against is stuff that really affects every single normal working class, middle class Australian. Yeah, so if they're going to choose him to be the person that is, their representative, then yeah, we're going to poke fun at him because, the things that he's voting against are not okay.
Why do you think we're not seeing this sort of mobilisation against Anthony Albanese? There's a raft of things that we could be critical of him for doing. Cost of living is one of them, not taking a tough approach when it comes to Donald Trump. We see unprecedented rises in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in this country that we've actually never seen before. And then we've had decisions, which is kind of like a backflip on the green promises that they took to the election, where we've seen carbon emissions almost doubled under his leadership. Why do you think we're not seeing young voters mobilise in the same way here?
Look, what I think we're seeing is it's quite a stark contrast to what's happening in America right now, in all honesty. I think that realistically, the way that the younger demographic perceives Dutton, he's a Timu Trump. That's what he is. He said he likes his policies. I can see that a lot of people see in him what they see in Trump. I think that a lot of people, they feel that to vote for him and to have him be the leader of our country is to go down a similar route. And that's why we've definitely targeted him more so, I would say.
Do you think that perhaps young voters have a lack of trust in our system of government here in Australia? Because by way of having a prime minister, it's kind of set up very differently to having a president, and a prime minister doesn't hold as much executive power, and a prime minister's power is quite fettered when it comes to, the processes and structures. Do you think maybe we're kind of getting a bit lost here and conflating Australian politics with US politics?
I think it's not so much about mistrust. I think it's a lack of understanding. I think that the education system has really failed at informing young people the voting process, how preferential voting works, the fact that you can really just choose on someone that represents you and that you don't have to choose who you think will win and the lesser of two evils, I don't think that it's about a lack of trust in our system. I think it's a lack of understanding, and that's something I'm really trying to get out there.
I do want to talk a little bit more about Timu Trump. That's a nickname that the Batuta Advocate has given Peter Dutton ahead of the election. What are some of the characteristics that you think Dutton's displaying at the moment that makes him a knockoff or cheaper version of Donald Trump?
Just an alarming affinity to right-wing politics and moral beliefs, I would say, more than anything. His views on, abortion, his views on taxing and who we're meant to be taxing. I think it's some really scary stuff, to be honest. I saw a TikTok actually recently, I can't remember who it was one of the Greens party, that we still have the Lord's Prayer before Parliament. That's something that I've just found out. So I think it's more so just the right-leaning, the conservative leaning of it all that's kind of making people a bit nervous.
Which brings us kind of to where we're at now and seeing all these content creators coming online and people engaging with politics online. For a long time, analysis of politics and what politicians say has been, dissected by professionals, either policy experts, ex-pollies, journalists. Now we're seeing more and more young people turn to memes and videos by content creators. Do you think this is a step in the right direction?
I think it is. I honestly think it is, because truly some of my videos that go like the best, that perform the best, it's videos that are simply explaining just how our process works. One of my most successful videos was literally just explaining how preferential voting works. And if I can do that with a silly sound on top and that gets out to more younger people that wouldn't have known how it works beyond that, then I think that's a good thing.
To build up a little bit of your credentials here, and not to target you specifically, but why do you think online audiences should be listening to your political opinions and analysis?
I don't think they have to. They're more than welcome not to. Honestly, it's just my opinion. But that being said, my opinion is based on facts. It's based on readily Googleable information. You know what I mean? I don't have any credentials. I'm just a girl with a phone who has a lot of opinions, honestly. I grew up in a household where my parents were very aware, and I've definitely benefited from that. And I've continued to take that into my adult life. I continue to care about issues beyond myself and stay informed about those things. I do readily fact check everything that I post beyond Peggy Sue, obviously. But yeah, so honestly, no, they don't have to, but they can, and they can know that everything that I do say on my channel is, true at the very least.
I want to talk about the reactions to some of your content. Are you finding that there is a gender divide in the way that your content is received? And I'm asking that because globally, there's a voting divide starting to show between Gen Z women and men, with women, pushing far more to the left, and then men finding their way over on the right. Are you finding that's being reflected in your comments?
Honestly, I am quite happily surprised, I would say. I feel like I have received pretty, well-rounded support from both genders when it comes to the younger demographic. They're definitely out there. But in my experience, the only people that are really having a much of an issue with what I'm posting is the older demographic, and the male older demographic, honestly.
What are those who are critical of your content taking issue with?
Oh, just that it's like name calling and stuff like that. And it is that I'm not, that is, I know, I'm just poking fun, like truly. I think the very first video I did, I literally said, this is satire, please don't sue me. Everyone knows I'm joking. And anyone who doesn't are kind of like the same people who think those like AI videos of babies on the runway are real as well. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I think anyone who has the capacity for discernment will know that I am joking.
I will give you credit where credit is due. When you are being satirical, you are being satirical. And when you're calling out some, policies that you disagree with, you're also, being very serious in that delivery as well, even though it is presented through the lens of a TikTok trend. So, when I was first kind of exposed to you and your political content, it was on my For You page. And there was a clip that you had posted. You were lip syncing a trending sound, and it read, Dutton literally voted against a federal anti-corruption commission, and it had this sound attached to it.
You don't find that suspicious?
The clip and post itself doesn't provide further context into when and why he's voted that way. It's a very top-line view of that, opinion and that analysis. I can already hear the critics saying that that's irresponsible. What do you think? Do you think it's irresponsible?
There's two layers to that. Firstly, I would say I think it's instigating someone to look it up. I think it's making someone say, okay, what on earth does that mean? And they'll look it up and they'll see the nuance to that topic. I don't think, in my 15-second video, I have the responsibility to show all the mitigating factors to why he did or didn't do that. There are videos where I will go into more detail and I kind of follow up on trends and on videos that I've done in the past. But yeah, the biggest thing for me is I'm more than happy to say something that's eye-catching and a big deal because it is true. If that's the instigator for someone to take it upon themselves to look further into an issue, then that's phenomenal. I don't think it's irresponsible at all because it's still true.
I will push back on that one specifically, though. When Dutton became opposition leader in 2022, he was very vocal in his support for the Anti-Corruption Commission, and that was something that, with coalition support, ended up becoming law, and we do have a National Anti-Corruption Commission, which still exists today. If someone were to just be scrolling your feed and just see that top-line video and not go out and do the further research, it is a little deceptive, no?
Yes. So my answer to that one would be that the Anti-Corruption Commission that he did end up supporting was an extremely watered-down version of what was initially proposed. So I still think that the energy and the message of what I said is true and real. Yeah, he ended up supporting it, but it was when he got to a point where he had to. Do I hope that everyone does the additional research? 100%. But at the same time, I don't think that my messaging is misleading at all.
Well, I guess anyone who hops onto your feed at the moment and just does a very quick scroll, they'll it's pretty clear you're not Peter Dutton's biggest fan. That's a nice way of putting it.
I'm his worst nightmare.
Would a Peter Dutton prime ministership be dire for Australia?
Look, I don't think it would be dire. I think that will always be people that push back and always be people that hold people accountable. But I think with America, it's showed us how quickly things can go sideways. And with what's happening over there, really, I don't know if it's incentivizing is the right word, but kind of indoctrinating a lot of people over here. I think they are now kind of putting Dutton up as the representative for those beliefs over here. So I do think it has the capacity to be very serious. Yeah, not necessarily dire, but I think it pushes us in the wrong direction 100%.
For a lot of content creators, including yourself, this would most likely be the first election that, you could be creating content around, given that TikTok's had its meteoric rise since our last election and more people are hopping on the platform and realising its political value. Do you plan to continue with this type of content during the election campaign, and what are you hoping to achieve?
I will absolutely be continuing this content throughout the election and then after the fact, no matter who is voted in. Honestly, what I'm trying to achieve, it's not necessarily telling you who to vote for, it's just telling you the facts. I think there's a really big issue in Australia and a lot of countries where the younger demographic are just simply voting for whoever their parents vote for. It's a very... it's an issue. And I think that if you look into it, you will realise that he doesn't represent you. And I don't think that, the younger demographic quite understand that.
Well, Holly McAlpine, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you so much for having me.
TikToker and political commentator Holly McAlpine speaking with me there. That is it for this episode of The Briefing. We'd love it if you could share it with someone who you think might enjoy it. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search Listener Newsroom. And don't forget, we'll be back in your feed today with another interesting deep dive at 3 p.m. But until then, I'm Chris Spiru. Catch you next time.
Listener.